My name is Mike, and for nearly a decade, I believed I was the architect of a life that was structurally sound. In my professional world of cybersecurity, I am paid to identify vulnerabilities before they become catastrophes. I spend my days building firewalls and my nights coming home to what I thought was an impenetrable sanctuary. Elena and I were the couple people used as a benchmark for stability. She was an architect, a woman who lived by the laws of balance and foundation. We had our rituals, the way the sunlight hit the kitchen table during our Sunday breakfast, the specific hum of the city outside our window, and the comfortable silence that usually signaled a deep, unspoken understanding. But looking back, I realized that silence can be deceptive. It can be the quiet of a peaceful home, or it can be the silence of a void where a heart used to be. The first cracks didn't appear in the walls. They appeared in the atmosphere. The air in our home started to feel thin, as if the oxygen was being slowly drained out of the rooms. Elena began staying late at her firm, citing a massive skyscraper project that required her out presence. When she did come home, she was a ghost of herself physically there, but miles away in spirit. She would spend hours staring at her phone, the blue light reflecting off her face like a cold shield I couldn't pierce. When I would try to bridge the gap with a touch or a simple question about her day, she would recoil slightly, offering a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself it was just a season of stress, a hurdle we would clear together. I didn't realize that while I was busy fortifying our perimeter, the intruder was already inside. Sitting at my table and sleeping in my bed, the discovery was a moment of cold, digital clarity that I will never be able to unsee. It was a humid Tuesday evening, and Elena had gone for a run, leaving her phone on the kitchen island, a rare oversight. Usually, that device was an extension of her hand. A notification lit up the screen, and then another, and another. It was a frantic, rhythmic pulsing of messages from a name I didn't recognize. Julian. My instinct, sharpened by years of looking for anomalies, took over. I picked up the phone. The messages weren't about blueprints or structural integrity. They were a vivid, agonizing map of a parallel life she had been building in the shadows. They were messages about secret lunches in Midtown, about their song, and most devastatingly, about the suffocation she felt whenever she stepped through our front door. There was a photograph, Elena, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years, leaning into this man with a raw, vulnerable affection she hadn't shown me in over a year. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was the realization that she had been giving the best version of herself to a stranger while leaving me with the hollowed out scraps of her exhaustion. When the front door finally clicked open and Elena walked in, glowing from her run and smelling of the fresh evening air, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply sat at the table with the phone resting between us like a live grenade. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I asked her how long I had been living with a stranger. The look on her face wasn't one of immediate sorrow. It was a frantic, desperate calculation, the look of an architect trying to prevent a building from collapsing in real time. As the night unfolded, the confrontation turned into a clinical dissection of our marriage. She didn't deny it, the evidence was too precise for that, but she began to weaponize my own devotion against me. She spoke of my long hours at the server farm, my obsession with security, and how my stability had turned into a cage for her. She wept, but the tears felt like they were for her own caught reflection, rather than the man whose life she had just set on fire. She offered excuses disguised as explanations, trying to make her choice seem like an inevitable reaction to my supposed flaws. The months that followed were a descent into a psychological wilderness. The emotional impact was a tidal wave that hit me in stages. First came the white-hot rage, a desire to erase every memory, to burn every photo, to delete her from my history as easily as a corrupted file. But anger is exhausting, and it eventually gave way to hollow, echoing sadness. I felt like a fool, replaying 10 years of memories and wondering which ones were real and which were part of a long-form performance. I would wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for her side of the bed, only to feel the coldness of the sheets and the weight of her absence. I felt a profound sense of failure, not just as a husband, but as a man who prides himself on seeing the truth. The humiliation was a constant companion, a nagging voice asking how many people had seen the cracks while I was busy polishing the windows. I found myself walking through the city, looking at other couples and wondering what secrets they were hiding behind their smiles. My trust in the world had been fundamentally recalibrated, and the new settings were set to paranoid. The decision to move forward was the hardest architectural feat of my life. Elena begged for a second chance. She suggested intensive therapy, a move to a different city, a complete digital transparency where I would have access to every account she owned. For a few weeks, I tried to convince myself that we could rebuild. I wanted to believe that the foundation was still salvageable, that we could treat this as a structural failure and reinforce the beams. But every time I looked at her, I saw the messages. Every time she smiled, I wondered if she was thinking of him. I realized that trust is not a light switch. It's a mirror. Once it's shattered, you can glue the pieces back together. But every time you look at your reflection, you see the jagged lines of the break. I didn't want to live a life of perpetual surveillance. I didn't want to become the person who checks phone logs at 3 a.m. and tracks GPS locations. I realized that the version of Elena I loved no longer existed, or perhaps she never had. I chose to walk away not out of spite, but out of a desperate need to find a version of myself that wasn't defined by her betrayal. Separation was the only way to stop the bleeding and begin the slow process of healing. Today, I live in a house that is much quieter, but the air is finally clear. Looking back on the wreckage, I've realized that betrayal is rarely a reflection of the person being betrayed. It is a manifestation of the betrayer's own internal voids and their inability to communicate their needs. I learned that you cannot be the sole guardian of a relationship. It takes two people to maintain the structure, and if one person decides to walk out the door, there is nothing the other can do to hold up the roof alone. My advice to anyone standing in the ruins of their own life is this: do not mistake the length of a relationship for its value. 10 years of history is not a reason to accept a lifetime of disrespect. You are allowed to walk away from a broken thing, even if you were the one who helped build it. I am still healing, and the scars are part of my new architecture now. They are reminders of where I was weak and where I have become strong. But for the first time in a long time, the foundation I'm standing on is real. I'm building a new life, and this time, the only person I'm responsible for securing is myself.